Sennheiser, a brand that has achieved legendary status with headphones like the extremely well-known HD580, HD600, HD650, and HD800, have just released a brand new over-ear open-back headphone, the HD660S2, coming in at $600. And today, we're going to find out if it lives up to their reputation. Hi guys, this is Andrew with Headphones.com, and yes, ever since the HD660S2 was announced, audiophiles everywhere, myself included, have been all aquiver with excitement. That's right, a quiver. And just before we get started here, if you're looking for an additional perspective on the HD660S2, definitely check out DMS's video. I'll link that in the description below. This is one of those times when Spider-Man is pointing at the other Spider-Man when they realized, wait a second, we had the same headphones in for review. So we figured, what the hell, let's just both do it. Make sure you let them know that I sent you. Now, I've always loved Sennheiser as a brand because they regularly make some of the very best engineered and well-produced products in audio. And this is what's led to many of them having that sort of extreme longevity within the market that they've enjoyed. And even though they've also had some duds along the way, their past success has also set the bar unfairly high. So today with the HD660S2, we'll see whether or not this one achieves it. So as usual, let's start with build quality, design, and comfort. With the HD660S2, it's basically the same as what we've come to expect from Sennheiser with the other products in the HD6 series lineup. It has this sort of no-nonsense, very headphone-like design. Okay, yeah, obviously it's headphone-like because it's a headphone. But when you see one of these in the wild, let's just say it's an iconic design. You know what it is. Now what's new here is the bronze colorway for all the lettering, and even the logo on the side here, which is markedly different from the blue that's on the that's black, which is markedly different from the blue that's on the HD600 here, and then also the gray and the black on the 660S right here. Apart from that, the rest is just full on black, and that's way better than the marble countertop insanity of the old HD600s that some of you psychopaths out there seem to think is a good thing. This just looks simple, classy, elegant, and clean. I like it. The comfort is also very familiar. If you're used to any of the other ones, this one wears basically the same. And for those who are maybe uninitiated, when you put it on, there is initially a little bit of extra clamp force. This is, by the way, how it looks when I wear it. Doesn't really improve much. The clamp force does lessen over time, and some people are even stretching them out over a stack of books and stuff like that. They eventually become a headphone that sort of disappears on your head, and for me that's sort of how this is as well. Now for accessories, you get a couple things here. You get a baggie. It's just a baggie. You get a couple of cables. One of them is terminated in 1/4 inch right here. The other one is Pentagon balanced, and then you also get a little adapter here from 1/4 inch to 3.5 millimeter. So you should be covered for your various different devices that you have. One thing to note though is that the connector side is still the same one that you found on the HD660S and their other designs, so it's their proprietary connector. For power requirements, the HD660S2 has gone back to the 300 ohm impedance, up from the previous HD660S, so I'm going to recommend an amplifier with this one. It doesn't need anything crazy by any means, but I think having a dedicated source is a good idea for this headphone. Just for reference, I've been using it primarily out of the Zale HM1 amplifier and the Matrix X Saber Pro for the DAC, as well as the Vioelectric HPA V550, and also the Amps and Sound Tube amplifier that's right over there just for some fun. Now, let's talk about how the HD660S2 sounds. Is it any good? The answer is sort of. In short, this is a mostly pleasant sounding headphone in certain aspects, but it may not be quite what people expect or want. Now, it seems the story of the HD660S2 is meant to be that it has more sub-bass than its predecessor. This is a compelling narrative because pretty much what the entire audiophile world yearns for, what all of us want, is an HD600 with full bass extension. Or at least that's what many of us want. It's what I want. Give me what I want. But that's really not what this is. That's not what the HD660S2 is. So to give an indication of how this sounds, let's dive into the frequency response measurements. Now, if you're totally new to reading headphone measurements, there are some links in the description that can help make sense of what you're seeing here. So I'd encourage you guys to watch that if you're new, or even if you're a little bit experienced with headphone measurements, there's also new stuff in there to learn as well. It'll help make sense of what you're seeing here. And that's particularly important because what I'm showing you here is the measurement done on the brand new B&K 5128 system, or new to us, I guess, which is currently the most advanced headphone measurement system. We're taking a look at the raw and compensated results for the 660S2. And once again, I have to say this as many times as possible. For raw measurements, no headphone should measure flat, but for compensated headphone measurements, you may want it to measure flat. You might also want more bass or less bass or more treble, whatever. There is a subjective element to this. I think you get the idea. But generally, flat is the desirable thing there for neutral. Now, taking a look at the measurements, you can see that the HD660S2 has a reasonably balanced sound signature for much of it, with a couple of quirks to the tuning in the upper mids. From my testing, it's true that the HD660S2 has better sub-bass extension than the HD660S. And I'm going to say flat out that the new one here is just a straightforward upgrade over the previous one. So the S2 is better than the S. And I think if that's all you compare it to, yeah, this is great. But the difference in sub-bass is also not that significant. The extra sub-bass extension, which means basically not more bass, but deeper bass, isn't really enough to make the HD660S2 sound as good as the HD600, for example. And for those who really want that extra sub-bass grunt, this still isn't going to give it to you all that much. Now, there is a perceptual difference to the sub-bass and to the bass, even among all these other models as well, but it's subtle, and one that I don't think is going to make or break this headphone for people. Instead, the more perceptually relevant aspect to this headphone is what's going on in the upper mids and in the lower treble, and this is where you see that dip going on here. And this is really what I think is going to be make or break for people. You see, when you compare the HD660S2 to the HD600 right here, the S2 is meaningfully relaxed around 3K, followed by what seems to be a deep phase cancellation feature going on, while the HD600 has that whole region filled in and has a lot more presence there. And the effect of this on the S2 is that you lose out a little bit on clarity and instrument tones by comparison. But with that said, there are certain styles of music that are going to benefit from this, like more upbeat or aggressive styles of music. I'm thinking like, stuff with electric guitars, heavy metal, rock, that kind of thing. You generally don't want that region to come across too strongly because that can be glaring, harsh, fatiguing sounding. And for anybody who found the originals shouty based on the music that you were listening to, or just if that's how it sounded to you, the more relaxed presentation on the 660S2 might be something that you actually want. And while I hesitate to say that it's more versatile, it is a little bit more easygoing for certain types of music. In my view, the HD600 is still the better sounding headphone, as is the HD650. And they both have a more straightforwardly good tuning. The HD600 in particular is the one that sounds the most normal in a good way. While by comparison, the HD660S2 sounds a bit thicker throughout the mids. It's got that thickness. It's got that thickness because of the relaxed upper mid-range, instead emphasizing fundamental tones throughout the mids and lower mids, meaning that it's simply less clear. And again, some people might be into this, and as I mentioned before, for certain tracks it does work, but I just prefer the clarity of the HD600, and I think most folks probably will as well. And the other thing to keep in mind is that it's also unlike the HD650 in the sense that, the HD650 is a slightly warmer presentation than the HD600. The HD650's warmth comes instead from, mid and upper bass presence, while the S2's comes from that more relaxed presentation in the upper mid. So it's a different kind of thing going on here. And, it's not exactly true to say that they're similarly warm because they are differently warm. Now, for treble performance, the HD660S2 is actually pretty solid, for the rest of the treble above there. But the one thing to keep in mind is that this series is really well known for having less treble as the pads wear in over time. And, we don't know yet how that's going to translate on the new model. Maybe they won't be, exactly the same for how the pads wear in. I haven't tested that. But, I wouldn't be surprised if, over a year or so, you'd find that there's even less treble on the 660S2. And that might be, a bit of an issue when you consider that it already, kind of lacks a little bit of the clarity when compared to the HD600 and the HD650. Now, for those wanting to see my EQ adjustments for the HD660S2, these are also up on the forum thread already. If you have this headphone or you recently purchased it and you want to try and, kind of improve the sound quality or change it in some way, and you're willing to do this, I would encourage you to give those a shot. And please let me know how that sounds to you. Drop it in the comments or also comment on the thread, whichever suits you better. Let me know what you think because It sounds really good to me when I make those adjustments, and they're not hard to make because, again, the treble balance here is reasonably intact. So I didn't have to do any, super fine grain stuff. The one thing though is that I wasn't able to fully fix, the 4.5K dip there, because that does again seem to be a deep phase cancellation issue, and so it doesn't really take to EQ quite the same way. But of course, that's just the way that this looks on a graph. Let's now talk about how it sounds subjectively, where we use our big boy words to describe the sound. Okay, so the HD660S2 sounds similarly detailed or resolving as the HD650 or HD600. And I'd say actually that the strengths and weaknesses of the other HD6 series transfer over to this one as well. So it's not particularly spacious sounding. It doesn't have the most even presentation for, where the images are coming from. However, the instrument separation and incisiveness is excellent on this. It sounds tight and controlled during busy passages. It's easy to isolate individual instrument lines, and it's generally revealing for the finer little nuances and trailing ends of tones. So there's no blunting or lopped off kind of quality going on with these ones whatsoever. It's not quite as good on these as it is on the other two, and that's just because of the more kind of flaccid upper mid-range presence, but it's still good. And if this tuning is something that you're after, know that the subjective aspects of this are totally intact. It does not, however, do well at that sense of physicality and impact and punch that you get with some of the Focals or the Fostex driver headphones. Those seem to do a little bit better there. So if you're really after that quality, the extra sub bass that you get here, it doesn't really give you that. Okay, so here's how I think we can think about the HD660S2, or at least this is how I think about it. While this is a decent sounding headphone, and it can be elevated to a great sounding headphone with a touch of EQ, Sennheiser has already set the bar a little bit too high. I straight up don't think that the HD660S2 is an upgrade over either of the other two, the HD600 and HD650 headphones, even though it is absolutely better than the HD660S. Instead, the S2 should probably be thought of more as an alternative to that traditional Sennheiser kind of sound that many of us know and love. And I do think that there is an audience for this kind of sound. And that's why for my personal ranking list, I'm going to place them into tier 5, which is that they're not for me, but I can also see why other people might like them. And this is unfortunately where my disappointment comes in. We have to recognize this, that the HD660S2 is literally twice the price of the other two, and in some cases more. And it isn't categorically better. And I know this is a new product, and the older models have been out for a generation, but the fact that the HD6XX exists at around $200 or something like that, with similar performance, it makes it really difficult to recommend the HD660S2, given the massive price difference, at least in North America. And for those who know that this kind of sound signature is their kind of thing, they know that they want less upper mids and slightly more sub bass, well, the HD660S2 might be for you, but in this case, having that preference is going to cost you. Or alternatively, you could just EQ the cheaper ones. That's what I do. Okay, I know I can't expect anybody to do that. I just felt I didn't have enough people mad at me telling me EQ was the devil. Yeah. So there you go. Anyways, that does it for this video. If you'd like to learn more about this headphone, check out the measurements that I've linked in the description. As I mentioned, with all of the nerdy squiggly line, wiggly air stuff, make sure you guys check out the audio files for our written reviews and join us on Discord. That's also linked in the description below. And of course, if you guys want to see more videos like this one, consider subscribing. It helps us out. All right, bye for now.